Don't you dare, ref. That's he got the ball. Good evening, Tottenham fans all across the globe, and happy Friday to you all, and hopefully you are availing of the fruit that life has to offer. But the reason why I've gathered you all here tonight is that Tottenham are back in action tomorrow at lunchtime, 12:30, to face London rivals West Ham at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And of course, we are aiming to get back to winning ways. A strong response is needed at home in front of our supporters, especially after the capitulation against Brighton, and there's no better time to deliver it than at home in a London derby. With it also being a London derby at home, we can't afford to drop any points, which means Postecoglou has to get his team selection absolutely spot on. The big dilemma is, does he choose to make changes and shake things up, or will he stick with the same 11 and give them a chance to redeem themselves? So let's get into it. The lineup that I think Postecoglou will go with tomorrow to try and take all 3 points off West Ham. Retaining his place between the sticks will be Guglielmo Vicario. Despite conceding 3 goals against Brighton, I don't think any of them were his fault. One positive observation of Vicario over the last little while though is that he is beginning to command his area much more effectively from set pieces, and this skill will be absolutely crucial against West Ham given their set piece threats. It's an area that they are likely to exploit to find success against us. At left back, I think Destiny Udogie will retain his place despite an awful performance against Brighton. He was absolutely dreadful. For the first goal, he got caught daydreaming and failed to anticipate that Van de Ven would miss that clearance, and in the second half he was absolutely torn apart down that left hand side. And to be honest with you, Udogie's performance was so poor that he does deserve to sit this one out. However, because we don't have a natural backup left back replacement for Destiny Udogie, I think we have no option but to play him here again. And I know some people will be saying, Dave, what about Jed Spence? He's only after signing a new contract. However, I think that contract is more in reaction to Real Madrid's interest in Pedro Porro, more than Tottenham having a long-term solution for Jed Spence at this current time. And as we've seen with the case of Emerson last year, Jed Spence is a right back. He is not a long-term solution to fill in that left back for Destiny Udogie. At right back, I expect Pedro Porro to keep his place, and against Brighton he was completely outmatched down that right hand side and failed to get close to Mitoma all game. However, Pedro Porro should be feeling very, very confident right now after returning for Spain over the international, playing both games and keeping 2 clean sheets in the process. Porro's passing and his crossing will be absolutely vital for Tottenham to be able to break down this West Ham team. I do expect him to sit there and play a low block. And Porro hasn't posed a significant goal threat for quite some time now. And am I becoming concerned? No. But do I think this is the perfect time to rise to the occasion? I do. And I would put a fiver on Pedro Porro stepping up with a goal. Now, at centre-back, I wonder will Postecoglou elect to make a change here? Of course, Romero was captain against Brighton, but he didn't really say a word to rally or motivate the team. He sort of just simply sat back and watched the capitulation unfold, and his performance was atrocious, and he's been our worst defender this season. Not only that, Romero has played in Argentina's 6-0 victory over Bolivia in the FIFA World Cup qualifiers, which take place in the early hours of Wednesday. That leaves him with very little time to recover before the early kickoff against West Ham tomorrow. Given this, I just have a sneaky suspicion Postecoglou might make a change here. It's an easy one to make. He could just simply say to Romero, look, I'm resting you for bigger games upcoming, and give Radu Dragusin a starter. Of course, performed very well over the international break, but would also be a significant asset in helping defend West Ham's set-piece threat. At left side of centre-back, there really is only one option, and that is Mickey van de Ven, who seems to have evaded a lot of the criticism after the Brighton fallout. However, I would argue he was just as bad, if not worse, than Christian Romero. Defensively, he was all over the place, which I've only really seen when he's come up against Isaac against Newcastle, but also in possession, very rare that I see this from him, but the ball was stuck under his feet. He wasn't fluid in his movements. However, I do believe this was a one-off performance from Van de Ven, and that he will return to his best against West Ham, and his recovery pace is going to be absolutely crucial once again here. At CDM, I do think this is another decision that Postecoglou has to make heading into this game. Bentancur's defending for that third goal was inexcusable. He backed out of the challenge and didn't show the same determination as the Brighton player. I don't think he wanted it as much as him. And if Postecoglou does want to send a message, this is another player who could very well be dropped. However, Bissouma, I find, was just as ineffective when he came on, often running into dead ends and misplacing passes. But given that it is a London derby, I do believe we need to field the more disciplined player in this position, and I do think that is Rodrigo Bentancur, and he has to come out here, put on a performance and atone for his error last week. Now moving into the two number 10 roles now in the midfield going forward, and we will start with Dejan Kulusevski, who looks like an absolute world beater in that central role, who's a willing ball carrier from the first minute all the way to the last, and his link-up play with Brennan Johnson in the first half against Brighton got me out of my seat every single time. His pace, his power and his driving runs pose significant challenges for opposing teams, and quite simply, they just don't know how to deal with it. And lastly, I would add, since moving into that position, I do think he brings a lot more creativity and potency to our forward line. And moving into the other number 10 role from the midfield, it will be James Maddison. With Maddison, I do think we're beginning to see Maddison return to some of his best form, becoming a threat in the final third again, which is exactly what we bought him for, and also off the back of scoring against Brighton and putting a brilliant first half display. However, this is something I have mentioned of Maddison before, and it's a slight criticism. In Ange's system, when we find ourselves under pressure, he needs to contribute a lot more defensively. In the second half, he seemed to go missing, and also the lacklustre challenge on one of the Brighton players before Bentancur could have snuffed it out. I think there was him, Edozie and Timo Werner all thrown in lazy legs, nowhere near good enough and completely inexcusable as well. And to be honest, quite disappointed from someone like James Maddison, who really seems to be picking up some form. And look, even if that's not his side of the game, he needs to be able to drop deep, get on the ball and start controlling possession for us for a little while to be able to help stem the flow and help relieve the pressure. And that's probably why he ended up being hauled off. But I also think Postecoglou needs to recognise this when the team's under the pump, that James Maddison isn't necessarily always going to help you in that regard. James Maddison is very good at getting the pressure on in the final third and nicking the ball up there. But when it comes to dropping in defensively, that's not his bag. And that's where I think Postecoglou needs to recognise it and make a substitution very, very quickly to help the team. Now, moving into the forward line and at left wing, praise the Lord, Alleluia. It is the return of our captain, Son Heung-min, who of course has missed the club's last 3 games due to a hamstring injury staying late in the game against Karabakh in the Europa League last month. And I do expect him to come straight back in the lineup, replacing Timo Werner, which many fans will welcome. Given Werner's continued lack of cutting edge, especially evident against Brighton, I don't think he completed one of his 3 crosses attempt, and one of them was inside the first 20 seconds, knowing between him and Brennan Johnson, and he couldn't find his man, which is indicative if Timo Werner's time at Tottenham and why a lot of fans do not want to see him in the lineup, and hopefully Postecoglou realises this. And lastly, what I will say on Son is I don't think he's been at his best this season. I think his best performance was against Everton, where he bagged 2 goals, but also the first half of the North London derby I thought he was a constant threat down that left hand side. But since then he's been quiet, and I do think it's a recurrent pattern. The last time we went out to South Korea on pre-season tour, he also showed a bit of lethargicness, wasn't at his best for that first period of season, but underneath Antonio Conte, come November time, he was at his best for Tottenham, and I do think it could be the same this time around with Son, and I think right now is the time where he's going to come back in and help pull this team forward. At right wing, it's Brennan Johnson, 6 goals in his last 6 games for Tottenham Hotspur. Some would say 7-7 because he bagged one for Wales as well. But he will be looking to make it 7-7 for Tottenham Hotspur against West Ham. This is a player that is really confident at the minute. You could tell that with his left foot first time finish against Brighton highlights just how confident he really is right now in front of goal. But also his link-up play with Kulusevski is flourishing, and I do think Johnson is really benefiting from having Kulusevski move into that central role. He draws a lot of bodies in, which frees up Johnson to make these runs, to get into these positions, into these goal-scoring positions, to be able to receive the ball, and right now he's adding the potency to come with it, so no complaints from me. However, in the second half, again, I do think he sort of faded out the game against Brighton. Not entirely his fault, not really going to get on to him for that. He's a winger, a forward player. He didn't really get any service, but maybe defensively, again, could he get on the ball, pick up the ball, help carry it up the pitch and relieve a little bit of pressure. But Brennan Johnson, I would love to see him go 10-10 like that account on Twitter predicted. So hopefully he can bag another one here against West Ham. And then that moves me to the guy up front, Big Dom Solanke, who provided an absolute brilliant assist for Brennan Johnson against Brighton. And it reminded me very much of Kane's link-up play with Son in years gone by. I wonder, can they develop a similar sort of relationship. I'm not going to say it's going to yield the same results, but can they develop a similar sort of relationship in that regard? That would definitely benefit Tottenham Hotspur going forward. And in the first half, I thought Dom Solanke was absolutely brilliant, held up the ball well, brought others into play, and that was the side of the game that I was maybe a little bit worried about him coming to Tottenham, but he was absolutely demonstrating he can do that in the first half. In the second half, again, another player that faded. Do I blame him entirely? No. But what I would say is that, you know, at times like that, Harry Kane was able to do it in years gone by, and it is something that we do need from a striker when we're under the pressure, that we can get the ball into him, get him to hold it up, and sort of help us drag us up the pitch. Of course, didn't score against Brighton, but hopefully he returns to the back of the net against West Ham, and no better time for Dom Solanke to get love off the Spurs fan base by turning up in a London derby. So guys, that's my predicted lineup and my reasons behind it. I would love for you guys to get in the comment, give me your predicted lineup and your reasons as well. If there's anything you disagree with, please inform me and let me know. Also, give me your score predictions. But guys, go and get an early night. Get up early tomorrow morning and let's get behind the boys. Hopefully we'll return to winning ways against West Ham in a London derby. Come on, you Spurs. In the big hands we trust. We never stop. Mwah!